One Friday evening, my son invited me to dinner. When I arrived, there was an extra place set at the table for my husband who died 2 years ago. When I asked why, my son turned pale and said, "Mom, there's something we never told you about Dad." What I discovered that night would turn my entire life upside down. The man I'd been married to for 41 years wasn't who I thought he was, and the people hunting for his secrets were willing to kill to get them. My name is Beatrice Lockwood. I'm 64 years old, and this is the story of how I learned that love and lies can exist in the same heart. Let me introduce the people in this story. There's me, Beatrice Lockwood, a widow who spent 41 years farming in Pennsylvania. My husband Raymond Lockwood died 2 years ago at 67, or so I thought. My son Oliver is 38, a software engineer who inherited his father's careful nature. His wife Emily teaches 3rd grade and has always been kind to me, though I'd never call us close. Their daughter Sophie is 13, all knees and elbows and questions I don't always know how to answer. Then there are the others. Victoria Ashford, though I didn't know her name yet. Jack Harrison, a private investigator I'd never met. Sarah Mitchell, a lawyer whose business card I'd find in my basement. And Frank Morrison, our 82-year-old neighbor, the only person Raymond ever truly trusted. If you're listening from somewhere far away, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this has traveled. And please, stay with me until the end. This story starts on a Friday in October. The leaves were turning, and the air had that particular smell of dying things and new beginnings. I should have known something was wrong the moment Oliver called. The invitation came on a Tuesday. "Mom, can you come for dinner Friday night?" Oliver's voice on the phone carried that careful tone he'd developed since Raymond died, like I was made of glass that might shatter if handled roughly. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, stirring the pot of soup on my stove. The farmhouse where Raymond and I had raised our children felt too big these days. Too many rooms filled with 40 years of memories and the particular kind of silence that comes after a long marriage ends. Not with divorce or anger, but with a heart attack on a Wednesday morning while checking the north fence line. 2 years had passed since that morning. 2 years since I'd found him face down in the tall grass, his work gloves still on his hands. "Just us," Oliver added. "Nothing fancy. 6:30? Should I bring anything?" A pause. "Just yourself, Mom." That should have been my first clue. Oliver always said yes when I offered to bring dessert. He loved my apple pie, had since he was 5 years old. Friday arrived gray and cold. I spent the afternoon baking anyway. Keeping my hands busy stops them from shaking, and drove to Oliver's house in Millbrook's quiet suburbs just as the sun was setting. The colonial looked warm and inviting, with lights glowing in every window. Almost too inviting, like a stage set waiting for actors to take their places. Emily answered the door. She'd always been beautiful in that careful, maintained way. Highlighted blonde hair, expensive athleisure wear, a smile that never quite reached her eyes. But tonight something was different. She looked nervous. "Beatrice," she said, kissing the air near my cheek. "You shouldn't have." She took the pie from my hands like it might burn her. "I wanted to," I said, stepping into the foyer. "Where's Sophie?" "Sleep over at Madison's house." Emily's voice was too bright, too quick. "We thought it would be nice. Just the adults tonight." That was my second clue. Sophie was always home for Friday dinners. She'd complained about it just last week, wanting to go to a football game instead. "Is everything all right?" I asked. "Fine. Everything's fine." Emily practically fled toward the kitchen, leaving me standing in the hallway with my coat still on. Oliver appeared from the dining room, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He was 38 but looked older tonight, shadows under his eyes, a tightness around his mouth that reminded me painfully of his father. "Mom," he hugged me, holding on just a beat too long. When he pulled back, he wouldn't meet my eyes. "Come on, dinner's ready." The dining room was set with Emily's good china, the cream-colored set with gold trim her mother had given them. Candles flickered in crystal holders. Classical music played softly from hidden speakers. It was lovely and formal and completely unlike our usual casual family dinners. And there were 4 place settings, 4 plates, 4 sets of silverware, 4 wine glasses catching the candlelight. But there were only 3 of us. The 4th place was set at the head of the table. Raymond's place. The position he'd always occupied in our own home, the seat of the patriarch, the father, the man who was supposed to guide and protect his family. My breath caught in my throat. Oliver. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Why are there 4 places? He turned pale, actually pale, the color draining from his face like someone had opened a tap. Emily's hand flew to her mouth. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The classical music continued its pleasant meandering, completely at odds with the sudden tension that filled the room. Oliver, I said again, more firmly. What's going on? He exchanged a look with Emily, one of those married couple looks that communicates volumes in a glance. She gave a tiny shake of her head, but he straightened his shoulders like a man preparing to jump into cold water. Mom, he said slowly, carefully, we need to talk. About Dad. The room tilted slightly. I reached for the back of the nearest chair to steady myself. Please sit down, Emily said, her voice gentler than I'd heard it in months. This is going to be difficult. I sat, but not in my usual place. I chose the chair closest to the door. Some instinct made me want an exit nearby. Tell me, I said. Oliver sat across from me, his hands flat on the table like he was trying to anchor himself. Dad didn't die the way you think he did. He had a heart attack. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, distant and hollow. In the North Pasture, Dr. Morrison said it was massive, instantaneous. He wouldn't have suffered. That's true, Oliver said. But there's more, Mom. He took a deep breath. Before he died, Dad gave me something, made me promise to keep it safe. He said if anything happened to him, I should wait 2 years, and then I should tell you. 2 years? I repeated numbly. Why 2 years? He said you'd need time to grieve first, time to be strong enough to handle what he had to tell you. Emily returned from the kitchen carrying a wooden box, maybe 8 inches square with brass corners and a keyhole in the front. She set it on the table between us with a soft thunk. I recognized it immediately. Raymond's tackle box, the one his father had made for him 50 years ago, carved from walnut with their initials intertwined on the lid. R.L. plus J.L. Raymond Lockwood and James Lockwood. Except it wasn't James Lockwood. Raymond's father's name had been Thomas. I'd never noticed that before. In 41 years, I'd never questioned those initials. Open it, I heard myself say. Oliver produced a small brass key from his pocket. His hands shook as he inserted it into the lock. The mechanism clicked, and the lid lifted with a soft creak. Inside, the box was divided into compartments lined with red velvet, but instead of fishing lures, it held documents, photographs, and on top of everything, a letter in Raymond's handwriting. My name written across the envelope in his familiar scroll. I picked up the letter with trembling fingers and began to read. Beatrice, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry for the secrets. I'm sorry for the lies. But most of all, I'm sorry for what you're about to discover. Our life together was real. My love for you was real. But my past belonged to someone else entirely. Burn everything in this box after you've read it. Trust no one. And whatever you do, don't let them know you know. Your life may depend on it. Yours always, R. My hands trembled as I set the letter down. What does this mean? Who's them? Oliver's face was drawn, aged beyond his years in the candlelight. I don't know, Mom. Dad never told me. He just said when the 2 years were up, you'd need to know the truth. About who he really was before he came to Millbrook. What are you talking about? But even as I asked, I was reaching for the other contents of the box. The first thing I pulled out was a photograph. It showed a young man in his 20s, handsome, smiling, wearing an expensive suit, standing in front of a mansion I didn't recognize. He had his arm around a beautiful woman in pearls. The young man was Raymond, but he looked different. His hair styled differently, his expression more arrogant, his entire bearing that of someone from a world I'd never known. Who is that woman? I whispered. We don't know, Emily said quietly. But look at the date on the back. I flipped the photo over, written in faded ink. Newport, July 1982. July 1982. The month before Raymond had arrived in Millbrook, driving a beat-up truck and looking for farm work. The month before, he'd walked into Harrison's diner where I was waitressing and ordered coffee and pie and asked if I knew anyone who was hiring. The month before our life together had begun. There's more, Oliver said, pulling out a yellowed newspaper clipping. The paper crackled in his fingers as he slid it across to me. The headline read, "Prominent Boston heir missing. Foul play suspected." I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. The photograph accompanying the article showed the same young man from the other photo, but the caption beneath didn't say Raymond Lockwood. It said James Whitmore III. "Mom," Oliver's voice seemed to come from very far away. "I think Dad was running from something, or someone. And I think," he swallowed hard, "I think whoever he was running from might have found him." The doorbell rang. We all froze. The sound echoed through the house, jarring and wrong in the sudden silence. Emily's face went white. "We're not expecting anyone," she whispered. Oliver stood slowly, moving toward the window. He lifted the edge of the curtain and peered out. When he turned back to us, his expression confirmed my worst fears. "There's a car in the driveway. Black sedan, tinted windows. 2 men in suits just got out." The doorbell rang again. Longer this time, more insistent. "Don't answer it," I heard myself say. My voice was hard, nothing like the gentle widow everyone thought they knew. Oliver stared at me. "Mom, is there a back door?" "Yes, through the kitchen, but..." I grabbed the box, shoving Raymond's letter into my purse along with the photograph and the newspaper clipping. My hands moved with a certainty that surprised me, like muscle memory from a life I'd forgotten I'd lived. "Beatrice, you can't just..." Emily started. I cut her off. "Listen to me very carefully. You're going to answer that door in exactly 30 seconds. You're going to tell them I left an hour ago. You're going to act natural, surprised they're here, confused about what they want. Can you do that?" They stared at me like I'd grown a second head. The doorbell rang a third time, and now there was knocking too. Firm, authoritative. The kind of knocking that said whoever was outside wasn't going away. "Can you do that?" I repeated more urgently. Oliver nodded slowly. Emily managed a small nod as well, though she looked terrified. "Good," I said, already moving toward the kitchen. "Don't call me. Don't text. I'll contact you when it's safe." "Mom, wait," Oliver called, but I was already gone, slipping through the kitchen and out the back door into the October darkness. Raymond's box clutched against my chest, my heart pounding with something that felt like fear but tasted like fury. My husband had been someone else, someone important enough that people were still looking for him 42 years later, and now he was dead, and they were coming for me. I didn't know who they were or what they wanted, but I was going to find out, even if it killed me. I drove for 20 minutes before I allowed myself to think. Back roads all the way, avoiding the highway, checking my rearview mirror for headlights that followed too closely or stayed too constant. Nothing. Just darkness and the occasional deer's eyes reflecting in my high beams. My hands had stopped shaking by the time I pulled into the gravel driveway of the farmhouse. The building rose up against the October sky, dark except for the porch light I'd left on, a habit from the years when Raymond would work late and I'd wait up, wanting him to come home to warmth and light. Raymond, James, whoever he'd been. I sat in the car for a full minute, engine off, listening to the tick of cooling metal and the distant sound of coyotes on the ridge. Then I grabbed the wooden box and went inside, locking the door behind me and throwing the deadbolt, for the first time in memory. The house felt different now. Every shadow seemed to hide something. Every creak of settling wood made me flinch. I'd lived here for 41 years, but suddenly it felt like enemy territory, a place where secrets had festered in the walls. I made coffee, strong and black. Then I spread the contents of Raymond's box across the kitchen table under the harsh fluorescent light. No more romantic candlelight and classical music. This required clinical clarity. The newspaper clipping was dated August 15th, 1982. I read it 3 times, absorbing every detail. James Whitmore III, 26, heir to the Whitmore textile fortune, has been missing for 3 weeks. Boston police confirm they are investigating possible foul play after bloodstains were found in his Beacon Hill apartment. Whitmore was last seen leaving the Harbor Club on July 23rd. His father, James Whitmore Jr., CEO of Whitmore Textiles, has offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to his son's whereabouts. "We just want James to come home," the elder Whitmore said in a statement. "Whatever trouble he's in, we can work through it as a family." Whitmore was engaged to Caroline Ashford, daughter of prominent businessman Gerald Ashford. Miss Ashford could not be reached for comment. $100,000 in 1982. That was serious money, the kind that would motivate people to search for a very long time. I pulled out more photographs. Raymond, James, at charity galas, yacht clubs, polo matches, always in expensive clothes, always with beautiful people, always looking like he belonged to a world that was light years away from Millbrook, Pennsylvania. Then I found the engagement announcement from the Boston Globe. The engagement of Miss Victoria Ashford to Mr. James Whitmore III is announced by her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Gerald Ashford of Beacon Hill. A June wedding is planned at Trinity Church. The photo showed a young woman with perfect bone structure and a smile full of white teeth and old money. Victoria Ashford. Not Caroline. Victoria. The newspaper article had gotten the name wrong, or perhaps there were two women. Either way, someone Raymond had been engaged to marry. Someone who might still be alive. Someone who might be looking for answers. I was so absorbed in the photographs that I almost didn't hear the car. Almost. Gravel crunched in the driveway. My blood turned to ice. I switched off the kitchen light and moved to the window, careful to stay behind the curtain. A dark SUV sat in my driveway, engine running, headlights off. No one got out. They just sat there, a shadow presence, watching the house. My phone buzzed. A text from Oliver. "Mom, where are you?" Those men said they were from Dad's estate lawyer's office. They had questions about his will. "Are you okay?" The estate lawyer's office. At 9 o'clock on a Friday night. I didn't respond. Instead, I gathered the contents of the box, my hands working fast despite the adrenaline making them clumsy. I needed a place to hide it. Not the basement, too obvious. Not my bedroom, too personal, the first place they'd look. The attic. The crawl space behind the chimney where Raymond had stored old tax records. I was halfway up the attic stairs when I heard it. The soft click of someone testing the back door. They weren't just watching anymore. They were coming in. I moved faster, climbing into the attic and pulling the stairs up behind me. The attic was cramped and dusty, filled with 40 years of accumulated life. Christmas decorations, old furniture, boxes of clothes Sophie had outgrown. I crawled on my hands and knees to the chimney, pulled away the sheet of plywood Raymond had used to cover the crawl space, and shoved the wooden box deep inside. Below me, I heard the unmistakable sound of breaking glass. I stayed frozen in the attic, barely breathing, listening to footsteps moving through my house. 2 sets, maybe 3. They weren't trying to be quiet anymore. "Nothing down here." A man's voice, educated, Boston accent. "Check upstairs." Another voice, heavy footsteps on the stairs. I pressed myself against the rafters, praying the attic stairs weren't visible, praying they wouldn't think to look up. "Bedroom's clear," the voice called from below. "No sign of anyone." "Car's here, so she can't be far. Check the outbuildings." The footsteps retreated. I heard the back door open and close. Through a gap in the attic boards, I could see flashlight beams sweeping across the yard, heading toward the barn and the equipment shed. I had maybe 5 minutes. I scrambled down from the attic, moving as silently as I could, and grabbed my purse from where I'd left it on the hall table. My car keys were inside, along with my phone and wallet. The house was a disaster. Drawers pulled out, cushions overturned, papers scattered everywhere. They'd been thorough. But they hadn't found what they were looking for. Because they didn't know me. Didn't know that a woman who'd spent 40 years managing a farm learned to think ahead, to plan for disasters, to keep important things safe. I slipped out the front door and around the side of the house, staying in the shadows. The SUV was still in the driveway, engine running. Through the barn door, I could see flashlights bobbing, hear voices calling to each other. My car was blocked in by the SUV. I'd have to walk. The nearest neighbor was the Morrison farm, 2 miles through the woods. Ben Morrison had been Raymond's closest friend, the one who'd helped us lease land when we were starting out, who'd helped with harvest every year until arthritis made it impossible. He was 82 now, a widower like me, living alone with his memories and his guns. I started running, staying off the road, following the old deer path that cut through the woods. My sensible shoes, chosen for a nice dinner with my son, were not made for cross-country hiking. Within 100 yards, I'd twisted my ankle. I kept going, ignoring the pain. Behind me, I heard shouting. They'd discovered I wasn't in the outbuildings. They'd figured out I'd run. "Fan out!" someone called. "She can't have gotten far." I ran harder, my breath coming in gasps, my ankles screaming protest. The woods were pitch black except for the occasional glimpse of moon through the canopy. I'd walked this path hundreds of times in daylight, but now every tree looked the same. Every shadow threatened to send me sprawling. A flashlight beam swept across the trees to my right. Too close. I dropped behind a fallen log, pressing myself flat against the damp earth, trying not to breathe too loudly. The beam passed over me, paused, came back. I could hear footsteps approaching now, branches snapping under heavy boots. "I've got movement. Sector 3. Pursuing." The footsteps came closer. I could see the outline of a man now, tall, broad-shouldered, holding a flashlight in one hand and something else in the other. Something that could have been a phone or could have been a gun. I grabbed a handful of dirt and rocks and threw it as hard as I could to my left, away from the path to Morrison's farm. The man spun toward the sound, his flashlight following, and I bolted in the opposite direction. "There!" he shouted. "She's running!" But I had a head start now, and I knew these woods. I veered off the deer path onto a narrower track that wound between dense underbrush. Branches tore at my clothes and skin, but I didn't slow down. The Morrison place was close now. I could see the faint glow of his security light through the trees. I burst out of the woods into Ben Morrison's backyard, just as lights came on in the house. The back door flew open and Ben appeared, shotgun in hand, wearing pajamas and a ratty bathrobe. "Beatrice?" His voice was sharp with alarm. "What in the hell?" "Ben, please!" I gasped, limping toward him. "I need help. There are men chasing me. They broke into my house." He didn't hesitate. Ben Morrison had served in Vietnam, had seen things he never talked about, and he recognized danger when he saw it. "Inside. Now." I stumbled through the door, and he locked it behind us, flipping off the lights. We stood in the darkness of his kitchen, both breathing hard while he peered out the window. "How many?" he asked quietly. 3, maybe 4. They came in a dark SUV. Ben cursed under his breath. "They're not just burglars, are they?" "No." My voice broke. "They're looking for something. Something to do with Raymond." He looked at me sharply. "What do you know?" "You knew," I said, realization dawning. "You knew he was lying about who he was." "I knew he had a past he didn't want found," Ben said carefully. "Didn't ask questions. Man's entitled to his secrets. But he made me promise." He paused. "He made me promise that if trouble ever came looking, I'd make sure you were safe." A flashlight beam swept across the yard. Ben raised his shotgun. "They're coming," I whispered. "My truck's in the garage," he said. "Keys in the ignition. You go out the front, take it, head to town, police station." "Ben, I can't leave you. I'm an old man with a gun on my own property, and they're trespassing." He smiled grimly. "You think I can't handle a few city boys? Besides, someone needs to get Sheriff Patterson out here." He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw something I'd never noticed before. The soldier he'd once been. The man who'd survived hell and come home changed. "Raymond loved you, Beatrice. Whatever else he lied about, that was true. He told me so himself, right before he died. Said you were the only real thing in his whole damn life." My eyes burned with tears I didn't have time to shed. "Front door's unlocked," Ben said. "Garage is attached. 3 minutes head start, then I'm calling the law and making some noise of my own." I squeezed his arm and ran through the dark house to the front door, into the garage where his ancient Ford pickup sat waiting. The engine roared to life and I peeled out of the driveway, headlights off, using only the moonlight to navigate. In the rearview mirror, I saw flashlight beams converging on Ben's house. Then I heard the shotgun blast. A warning shot, I hoped. Not something worse. I flipped on the headlights and drove faster, taking the back roads toward town, toward the police station, toward safety. My phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. Against every instinct, I answered. "Mrs. Lockwood." A woman's voice, cultured and cold. Or should I say Mrs. Whitmore? My heart stopped. "We need to talk," the voice continued. "About your late husband. About the money he stole. And about the very serious trouble you're in, unless you cooperate." "Who is this?" "Someone who's been looking for James Whitmore for 42 years. Someone who deserves answers. Someone who has no patience left." The line went dead. I stared at the phone in my shaking hand, then at the dark road ahead, and realized with sickening certainty that this was only the beginning. They knew who I was. They knew about Raymond. And they knew I had something they wanted. The only question was, what was I willing to do to survive? I didn't go to the police station. Something about that phone call, the woman's voice, the certainty in her tone, the way she'd said cooperate, told me that involving local law enforcement would be a mistake. These people had resources. They'd been searching for 42 years. They wouldn't be stopped by a small-town sheriff who'd probably never investigated anything more serious than cattle theft. Instead, I drove to the one place I thought they might not look, the Millbrook Public Library. It was closed, of course, well past 10 on a Friday night, but I knew the security code. I'd been on the library board for 15 years, had helped raise funds for the renovation, had spent countless volunteer hours shelving books and organizing reading programs for children. Martha Harris, the head librarian, had given me the code for emergencies. This qualified. I parked Ben's truck behind the building, out of sight from the street, and let myself in through the back door. The library was dark except for the green glow of emergency exit signs casting eerie shadows across rows of silent books. I'd always loved libraries, their smell of paper and possibility, their promise of answers to any question. But tonight it felt like a mausoleum. I made my way to the computer section, staying away from windows, and logged into one of the public terminals. My hands trembled as I typed, James Whitmore, the third Boston missing 1982. The results flooded the screen. Dozens of articles from the Boston Globe, the Herald, even the New York Times. The Whitmore family had been Boston royalty, old money, textile empire, political connections stretching back to the Revolutionary War. I clicked through article after article, piecing together the story. James Whitmore III had been the golden child, Harvard-educated, groomed to take over the family business, engaged to Victoria Ashford, daughter of another prominent Boston family. The wedding was scheduled for June 1983, but in July 1982, James had vanished. His apartment had been found in disarray, blood on the carpet, signs of a struggle. Police suspected foul play but had no body, no witnesses, no leads. The family had searched for years. Private investigators, reward money, even psychics. Nothing. Eventually, they'd held a memorial service and declared him legally dead. But someone clearly had never stopped looking. I searched for Victoria Ashford and found a more recent article from 5 years ago. Boston philanthropist Victoria Ashford donates $5 million to Children's Hospital. The photo showed an elegant woman in her mid-60s, silver hair perfectly styled, wearing pearls and a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. She'd married someone else, a diplomat named Richard Ashford, but kept her maiden name hyphenated, Victoria Ashford. She looked like someone who didn't forgive easily. I was so focused on the screen that I almost didn't hear the library's front door open. Almost. I killed the monitor and dropped to the floor behind the circulation desk, my heart hammering so hard I was sure it could be heard across the room. Footsteps echoed on the tile floor, measured, confident. Mrs. Lockwood. A man's voice, different from the ones at my house, younger, with a hint of Brooklyn in the vowels. I know you're here. The truck outside gave you away. I stayed silent, pressed against the cool floor, barely breathing. My name is Jack Harrison. I'm a private investigator. I was hired by the Whitmore family to find James Whitmore, to find out what happened to him. A pause. The footsteps came closer. I know you must be scared, he continued, his voice softening. I know this must be overwhelming, but I'm not your enemy, Mrs. Lockwood. More footsteps. He was almost at the desk now. I could see the shadow of his legs through the gap at the bottom. I've been working this case for 3 years, he said. The family hired me after the original investigator died. 73 years old, never gave up hope. That's the kind of hold James Whitmore had on people. Even after he vanished, they couldn't let him go. He was right beside the desk now. I held my breath. Here's what I think happened, Jack Harrison said quietly. I think James stumbled onto something he wasn't supposed to know. Something about his family's business, something criminal, or at least morally questionable. I think he threatened to expose it, and someone tried to kill him for it. I felt tears sliding down my cheeks despite myself. But James was smart, resourceful. He survived, And he ran, changed his name, changed his life, stayed hidden for 42 years. That takes discipline, planning, and it takes love, the kind of love that makes a man willing to give up everything he was for a chance at something real. He crouched down, and suddenly we were face to face through the gap in the desk. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with dark eyes that held something like sympathy. "Please," he said, "let me help you before they find you again." I made a decision. Maybe it was the wrong one. I'd know soon enough. But sitting in the dark, hunted and alone, I decided to trust the man with kind eyes. I stood up slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. Jack Harrison stood too. I saw he was holding only a phone, not a weapon. "Thank you," he said. That took courage. "How did you know I'd come here?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "I've been watching you for 3 weeks, Mrs. Lockwood, learning your patterns, your habits. You come to the library every Tuesday afternoon. You volunteer with the literacy program. When you're stressed, you read." He pocketed his phone. It seemed like a logical place. 3 weeks, the implications sank in. "You've been watching me since before those people showed up tonight. I had to make sure you weren't part of whatever James was running from, that you were innocent." He met my eyes. "You are, by the way. You had no idea who he really was." "No," I said bitterly. "I had no idea my entire marriage was a lie." "It wasn't a lie." Jack's voice was firm. "I've read every report, every interview, every scrap of information about James Whitmore. The man was a lot of things. Privileged, arrogant when he was young, reckless. But he wasn't a good actor. He couldn't have faked 41 years of devotion. He loved you, Mrs. Lockwood. That much I'm certain of." "Then why did he lie to me?" "To protect you. Because whatever he knew, whatever he had, was dangerous enough to kill for. Still is, apparently." I sank into one of the library chairs, suddenly exhausted. "There's a box. Papers, photographs, documents. Raymond left it with our son. Instructions to open it 2 years after his death." Jack's eyes sharpened. "Where is it now?" "Hidden. Safe." I looked at him directly. "Why should I trust you? You said yourself there are people who want to eliminate the evidence. How do I know you're not working for them?" "You don't," he admitted. "But consider this. If I wanted to hurt you, I could have done it 3 weeks ago. If I wanted the evidence destroyed, I could have burned your house down while you slept. I'm here because I want the truth." He hesitated. "And because my uncle was Carlos Harrison. He was the original investigator hired by the Whitmore family. He spent 30 years of his life searching for James, and it ate him alive. He died believing he'd failed, that James was dead in a shallow grave somewhere. I took over the case to finish what he started, to give him peace, even in death." There was something in his voice, grief, determination, a need for closure that I recognized because I felt it too. "The woman who called me," I said. "She said Raymond, James, stole money. Is that true?" Jack's expression darkened. "That's what his father claimed. $20 million disappeared from family accounts right before James vanished. But here's the thing. I've been through the financial records. The money wasn't stolen. It was moved, carefully, methodically, over the course of 6 months before his disappearance." "What does that mean?" "It means James wasn't running from theft. He was documenting something, building a case. Against who? That's what we need to find out." Jack pulled out his phone, fingers moving rapidly. "But I can tell you this much. The money that disappeared? It wasn't clean. The Whitmore family business wasn't just textiles. I think it was being used as a front, for money laundering probably. James found out, and he gathered proof. That $20 million? I think it was dirty money he moved into accounts where it could be traced back to its real source." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. "And then they came for him." "Yes, but he escaped, and he took the evidence with him." My phone buzzed. A text from Oliver. "Mom, please call me. Emily is in the hospital. They hurt her." The world tilted. "What?" Jack saw my expression. "What's wrong?" I showed him the text with shaking hands. He cursed under his breath. "They're escalating, using your family to pressure you." He pulled out his phone again. "I'm calling in backup. People I trust. We need to get your son and granddaughter somewhere safe." "Sophie," I whispered. "She's at a sleepover. Madison's house. Do you have the address? I nodded, mind racing. Oliver had said Emily was hurt. How badly? And why would they target her instead of him? Unless… Wait, I grabbed Jack's arm. Call the number. Don't text back. Call it. If it's really Oliver, he'll answer. If it's not… Jack's eyes widened with understanding. He hit the call button and put it on speaker. It rang 4 times. Then a woman's voice answered, the same cultured, cold voice from earlier. Mrs. Lockwood, so nice of you to reach out. My blood ran cold. Your son is fine, by the way, the woman continued. For now, as is your daughter-in-law. But my patience is wearing thin. What do you want? My voice came out steady, hard. I want what James stole from my family. I want the documents he used to betray us. And I want them within 24 hours, or people you love start dying. A pause. Do we understand each other? Who are you? Someone you should have met a long time ago. Someone who was supposed to be family. The woman's voice dripped with venom. I'm Victoria Ashford, James's fiancée, the woman he abandoned without explanation, without closure, without dignity. The woman who spent 42 years wondering why. My breath caught. You're behind this, I said. The break-ins, the threats. I'm behind finding the truth, whatever it takes. Her voice hardened. 24 hours, Mrs. Lockwood. The documents for your family's safety. I'll be in touch with location details. The line went dead. Jack and I stared at each other in the dim library light. She's not working for the people who laundered the money, I said slowly, realization dawning. She's working against them. She wants revenge, Jack said. Or justice, depending on your perspective. Either way, she has your family and she wants evidence that could destroy powerful people. Then we give it to her. Beatrice, we give her what she wants, I said, standing up, but not because she demands it, because it's the right thing to do. Raymond spent 42 years hiding that evidence. Now it's time to use it. Jack studied me. Once we do this, there's no going back. People will die. Maybe us included. I thought about Raymond lying in the ground, his secrets buried with him for 2 years while I mourned a man I'd never really known. I thought about Oliver and Emily, about Sophie who might lose her parents. I thought about the woman I'd been just hours ago, the gentle widow who baked pies and read to children at the library. She was gone. I'm not afraid anymore, I said. Raymond ran for 42 years. I'm done running. Jack nodded slowly. Then we need to move fast. First, we get that box. Then we figure out exactly what we're dealing with, what Raymond documented, what it proves, and who it implicates. And then… He smiled grimly. Then we set a trap. For Victoria? For everyone. The people who tried to kill James in 1982. The people who've been searching for him since. And Victoria Ashford herself. Jack's expression turned fierce. Your husband started something 42 years ago. It's time we finish it. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Oliver's number. 6 p.m. tomorrow. Old Whitmore Textile Mill outside Harrisburg. Come alone with everything or Emily dies first. Tomorrow, I whispered. We have less than 24 hours. Then we'd better get started. Jack headed for the door, then turned back. Beatrice, your husband chose well. You're exactly the kind of person who could survive this. I don't want to just survive, I said, following him into the night. I want to win. We left the library together, 2 hunters instead of 1, and somewhere in the darkness Victoria Ashford was waiting. But she didn't know what I'd learned tonight. She didn't know that the gentle farm widow had steel in her spine, and she didn't know that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone underestimates. Raymond had known it, though. He'd known I was strong enough for this. It was time to prove him right. We went back to the farmhouse at 2 a.m. Jack drove, his eyes constantly checking the mirrors, while I sat in the passenger seat trying to formulate a plan. The house was dark when we arrived. Whoever had broken in earlier was gone. But the damage remained. Overturned furniture, scattered papers, the broken window in the back door. They were thorough, Jack said, surveying the wreckage with a professional eye. But they didn't know where to look. I led him up to the attic. The crawl space behind the chimney was undisturbed, the wooden box exactly where I'd hidden it. Jack handled it reverently as we brought it down to the kitchen table. "Before we open this," he said, "I need to make some calls. Get people in position for tomorrow." "What people?" "FBI. The real FBI. Agents I worked with before I went private. People who can't be bought." He pulled out his phone. "If what's in this box is as damaging as I think it is, we need federal protection, and we need it documented properly so it can be used as evidence." While Jack made his calls, I examined the box's contents more carefully. There were documents I hadn't seen before. Pages and pages of what looked like accounting records, transaction histories, dates and numbers in Raymond's meticulous handwriting, and at the very bottom, a USB drive. "Jack," I said, "there's more." He ended his call and came over. When he saw the USB drive, his expression turned grim. "That's what they're really after. Everything else is just backup. The real evidence is digital." We plugged it into my laptop. The drive contained hundreds of files, scanned documents, photographs, audio recordings, spreadsheets. It would take days to go through all of it, but one folder was labeled "Read First." Inside was a video file dated 6 months before Raymond died. My hand trembled as I clicked play. Raymond's face filled the screen. He looked older than I remembered, tired, the weight of 42 years of secrets evident in every line. "Beatrice," he began, and just hearing his voice again made my chest ache. "If you're watching this, I'm gone. And if you're watching this, it means Victoria Ashford has found you." Jack and I exchanged a glance. "I'm sorry," Raymond continued. "Sorry for every lie, every secret, every moment I couldn't be fully honest with you. But I need you to understand why." He took a deep breath. "In 1982, I discovered that the Whitmore family business, my family's business, was being used to launder money for a drug cartel, not just small amounts. Hundreds of millions of dollars over the course of a decade. My father knew. His business partners knew. And Victoria's family, the Ashfords, they weren't just aware of it. They were orchestrating it." My hand flew to my mouth. "Victoria was the architect," Raymond said, his voice breaking. "The woman I was supposed to marry was running a criminal enterprise through our family's companies. When I found out, when I confronted her, she tried to have me killed. The blood in my apartment? Mine. I barely escaped." He leaned closer to the camera. "I gathered evidence. Everything you're seeing now, transactions, recordings, witness statements. I was going to turn it all over to the FBI. But then I learned they'd been compromised. Victoria's father was a federal judge. Her uncle was a senator. She had people everywhere. So I ran. I took the evidence and the $20 million, dirty money that I moved into accounts that would freeze if anything happened to me. Insurance. A dead man's switch." Raymond's eyes filled with tears. "I found Millbrook. I found you. And for 41 years I got to live a real life. The only real life I ever had. Every moment with you was true, Beatrice. Every moment was a gift." He wiped his eyes. "But they're coming. I can feel it. I've seen the same car 3 times this month. A man following me at the grocery store. They're close now. And my heart," he touched his chest. "My heart is giving out anyway. The doctor says I have maybe a year. I've made arrangements. Sarah Mitchell in Philadelphia has all the legal documents. If I die of anything other than old age, she'll activate the dead man's switch. Everything goes to the FBI, the DOJ, the media. Victoria knows this, which is why she'll come for you next, to find out if I left anything else." He leaned forward, his expression intense. "Don't give her anything. Don't negotiate. The moment you do, you're no longer useful to her, and she'll kill you. Instead, use the evidence. Finish what I started. Bring her down. Bring them all down." Raymond's face softened. "I love you, Beatrice. I've loved you since the moment I walked into Harrison's diner and saw you behind that counter. You saved my life in more ways than one. Now save yourself. Be brave. Be smart. And know that every single day I spent with you was worth it." The video ended. I sat in silence, tears streaming down my face. Jack gave me a moment, then quietly said, "We need to call Sarah Mitchell. Now." Sarah Mitchell answered on the second ring despite the 3 a.m. hour. When Jack explained the situation, she was all business. "The dead man's switch is still active," she confirmed. Raymond set it up so that if he died under suspicious circumstances, or if Beatrice was threatened, I could activate it with her authorization. It sends everything to predetermined contacts: FBI field office in Philadelphia, DOJ, 4 major newspapers. Can you delay it? Jack asked. We need Victoria to think she still has a chance to get the evidence first. I can hold it for 24 hours, but after that, with or without authorization, if I don't input a safety code, it auto-sends. Raymond's fail-safe in case something happened to both me and Beatrice. Good, I said, finding my voice. Here's what we're going to do. I laid out the plan. It was risky, possibly suicidal, but it was the only way to end this without my family dying. We would go to the meeting at the textile mill, but we wouldn't go to surrender. We'd go to get Victoria's confession on record. Jack would wire me with audio and video. FBI agents would be positioned outside. And the moment Victoria admitted to murder, to killing Raymond, to everything, they'd move in. She's smart, Jack warned. She won't confess easily. Then I'll make her angry enough to forget to be smart, I said. Raymond said she's been obsessed for 42 years. That kind of obsession doesn't think clearly. It feels. Jack studied me for a long moment. You've changed since this started. You're not the same woman who walked into your son's house for dinner. No, I agreed. I'm not. We spent the next few hours preparing. Jack showed me how the wire worked, a tiny camera in my jacket button, a microphone in my collar. He made me practice staying calm, keeping my body positioned for the best camera angle, speaking clearly for audio. At dawn, we drove to Frank Morrison's farm. I found him in his kitchen, drinking coffee, the shotgun still within arm's reach. He had a bruise on his cheek, but he was alive. Gave them hell, he said when he saw me. Fired 3 warning shots. They scattered like rabbits when they heard sirens. Sheriff's been here twice already asking questions. I told him some kids were vandalizing. He didn't buy it, but what could he say? Frank, I need to ask you something. About Raymond. Did he ever tell you what he was running from? Frank nodded slowly. Last year, when he knew his heart was going. He told me everything. Made me promise to look after you if it came to this. He met my eyes. He also told me you were stronger than you knew, that when the time came you'd know what to do. I'm going to end this, I said. Today, one way or another. I know you will. Frank squeezed my hand. Ray picked right. You're exactly the woman for the job. By 5 p.m., we were in position. Jack had briefed the FBI team, 6 agents stationed around the perimeter of the old Whitmore textile mill outside Harrisburg. The building was massive, 5 stories of broken windows and crumbling brick, surrounded by a chain-link fence breached in a dozen places. 3 vehicles were already in the lot, a black SUV, a sedan, and a white van. That's a lot of people, I said, my mouth dry. We expected that. Victoria didn't survive 42 years by taking chances. Jack checked his equipment one more time. Remember, we need her confession. Get her talking about Raymond's death, about the money laundering, about ordering the hit in 1982. Once we have that on tape, we move. He handed me a small panic button disguised as a key fob. If things go wrong, press this. Don't hesitate. Don't try to be brave. Just press it. I took it, along with a folder containing photocopies of some of Raymond's documents. Enough to be convincing, but not the originals. Those were with Sarah Mitchell, ready to be released if anything happened to me. One more thing, Jack said. Your son and daughter-in-law, they're not in that building. I stared at him. What? We tracked Oliver's phone. He's at home, safe. Emily's at the hospital with a sprained wrist, nothing serious. The texts were sent from a spoofed number. Jack's expression was grim. Victoria's been bluffing. She doesn't have them. She's been using fear to control you. Relief and fury washed over me in equal measure. So this whole thing is a trap, but now it's our trap. Jack touched my shoulder. You ready? I thought about Raymond, spending 42 years looking over his shoulder. I thought about Victoria, letting obsession consume her life. I thought about the woman I'd been just yesterday, the widow who'd accepted her quiet life. That woman was gone. In her place was someone who'd learned that sometimes love means fighting, not just enduring. I'm ready, I said. I walked toward the mill entrance alone, my shoes crunching on broken glass and gravel. The door hung crooked on its hinges. Inside, the vast space was empty except for rusted machinery and debris. Shafts of fading sunlight filtered through broken windows, creating patterns on the concrete floor. "Mrs. Lockwood," Victoria's voice echoed from somewhere above. "So nice of you to join us." I looked up. Figures moved in the shadows of the third floor. "Top floor," Victoria called down. "Take the stairs. The elevator hasn't worked in 20 years. I climbed, each step taking me higher into the trap. 5 flights of stairs, my heart hammering, my hand resting on the panic button in my pocket. On the top floor, I found them. Oliver and Emily weren't there. Jack had been right. But 4 men in dark suits stood around the perimeter, professional and armed, and by the window, silhouetted against the dying sun, stood Victoria Ashford. She was beautiful even now, just as the photographs had shown. Silver hair perfectly styled, expensive clothes, jewelry that probably cost more than my farmhouse. But her eyes were dead, cold, like looking into a frozen lake. "You have something of mine," she said without preamble. I held up the folder. "You have something of mine, my family, my peace of mind. 42 years of lies." Victoria smiled, and it was the most frightening thing I'd ever seen. "Fair enough. The documents, please." "First, I want to know why. Why did you do it? Why try to kill him?" "Because he was going to destroy everything." Her voice was matter of fact, discussing murder like a business transaction. "My family, my future, my name. He was going to be a hero, the whistleblower who brought down the corrupt Ashfords while I went to prison. I couldn't allow that." "So you ordered his death?" "I ordered him taught a lesson. The death was supposed to come later, after he'd learned his place." Victoria's voice hardened. "But he ran like a coward. Abandoned me, abandoned his family, stole millions of dollars and vanished. Do you know what that did to me? The humiliation? Everyone assumed he'd run off with another woman, that I wasn't enough for him." "You weren't," I said quietly, "because he saw who you really were." Victoria's expression darkened. "Don't pretend you knew him. You knew Raymond Lockwood, a fiction, a mask he wore to hide. I knew James Whitmore, the real man. The real man chose me over you," I said, taking a step forward. "Over his family, over everything. And he spent 42 years documenting every crime you committed, every life you destroyed, every dollar you laundered. You think you've been looking for him? He was watching you, building a case, waiting for the perfect moment to destroy you." "He's dead," Victoria spat. "The moment has passed." "Has it?" I opened the folder, showing her the first page, her signature authorizing a transfer of drug money, clear as day. "Because it seems to me like his moment is right now." Victoria stared at the page, and I watched her face change from arrogance to confusion to dawning horror. "That's not... You signed it, July 15th, 1982, 1 week before you tried to have James killed. He photographed everything, documented everything, kept it all safe, and now it's all going public." "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I pulled out my phone, showing her the screen. A draft email addressed to the FBI, the Boston Globe, the Washington Post, with attachments clearly labeled. "1 button, that's all it takes." Victoria's hand moved to her purse. I knew with terrible certainty what was inside, but I wasn't done yet. "I want to understand," I said, my voice carrying across the empty factory floor. "Help me understand how you became this, how the woman James loved enough to propose to became a monster willing to kill." And there it was, the crack in her armor. Her hand tightened on her purse. "You want to know?" Her voice rose, control slipping. "I'll tell you. I built that empire. Me. While James played polo and went to parties, I was running the business, making the connections, moving the money. And then he decided to grow a conscience?" She pulled out a gun, her hands shaking with rage. "He was going to throw it all away. 40 years of work. My father would have gone to prison. I would have lost everything. So yes, I ordered him killed. And when he escaped, I spent 42 years hunting him. I found 3 private investigators who got too close, 1991, 2003, 2015, and I eliminated them all. My blood ran cold." "You killed them." "Car accident. Mugging. Heart attack." Victoria's smile was terrible. "I'm very good at making death look natural, just like I did with Raymond." The words hung in the air like poison. "What did you say?" Your precious husband. You think he died of a heart attack?" She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Kyle Brennan met him at that diner 2 weeks before he died. Digitalis in his coffee. Every single day. Slow poison. Untraceable, unless you know to test for it specifically." The confession hung in the air between us. Victoria stood there, gun trembling in her hand, and I saw the moment she realized what she'd done. "You recorded that," she whispered, face going pale. I touched my jacket button where the tiny camera was hidden. "Every word." "You—" Victoria raised the gun, her hand shaking with rage. "If I'm going down, I'm taking you with me. FBI, drop your weapon." The windows exploded inward. Jack Harrison came through first, weapon drawn, followed by 6 federal agents rappelling down from the roof. Victoria's men reached for their guns, but froze as red laser sights dotted their chests. Victoria spun toward me, desperation replacing calculation. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." I stood my ground, no longer the frightened widow who'd walked into her son's house yesterday. "It's been over for 42 years. You just didn't know it." Jack reached us, gently removing the gun from Victoria's shaking hands. She didn't resist. The fight had gone out of her the moment she'd realized the truth, that her confession had been recorded, that everything she'd spent 4 decades protecting was about to crumble. "Victoria Ashford," Jack said formally, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering, and 4 counts of first-degree murder spanning 40 years. As they led her away in handcuffs, she looked back at me one last time. Not with hatred, but with something that might have been recognition. We were both women who'd lost decades to one man's choices, but where I'd found love despite the lies, she'd found only bitterness. "He never loved you," she said quietly. "He chose her. He chose ordinary over extraordinary, and I never understood why. Because extraordinary isn't the same as good," I said. "Raymond taught me that." The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters when the verdict came down. Guilty on all counts. Life without parole. I didn't attend the trial. Jack kept me updated, and that was enough. Victoria's case had become a media sensation. Boston socialites' 40-year crime spree exposed. The scandal reached further than anyone had imagined. 18 indictments followed, including 2 senators, a federal judge, and 5 CEOs. The Whitmore and Ashford family empires crumbled within weeks. But I wasn't thinking about that as I stood in my kitchen on a cold January morning, watching the sunrise paint the fields gold. The farmhouse felt different now, not because Raymond's secrets had been exposed, but because I'd made peace with them. Oliver had moved back home with Emily and Sophie. He'd quit his software job, deciding that watching numbers on a screen mattered less than working land with his hands. Sophie was teaching me to use social media. Apparently, the story had gone viral, and people wanted to hear from the woman who took down a crime dynasty. I'd declined most interview requests. This wasn't about fame. It was about finishing what Raymond had started. The Raymond Lockwood Foundation opened its doors in February. $60 million, the money Raymond had moved into those offshore accounts in 1982, now funded investigations into financial crimes, supported families of whistleblowers, and helped victims rebuild their lives. Sarah Mitchell served as general counsel. Jack Harrison ran the investigative division, and I chaired the board, making sure Raymond's sacrifice meant something beyond revenge. But today was personal. I drove to the cemetery alone, carrying fresh flowers. The headstone still read what I'd chosen 2 years ago: Raymond Lockwood, 1956 to 2022, beloved husband, father, grandfather. Someone had asked if I wanted to add his real name, James Whitmore III. I'd said no. "The man buried here is Raymond," I said aloud, kneeling to place the flowers. "James died in 1982. You became someone better." The wind rustled through the bare trees. I could almost hear Raymond's voice, that gentle tone he'd used when I was upset, when the farm was struggling, when life felt too hard. "You're stronger than you know, Bea. You always were." "I was so angry at you," I continued, tears sliding down my cheeks. "For lying. For the secrets. For making me question if anything was real." I touched the cold stone. "But I understand now. You gave up everything. Your name, your family, your entire identity, to do what was right. And then you gave up your freedom to love me." A car pulled up behind mine. I turned to see Oliver and Sophie getting out, carrying a thermos and cups. "Thought you might want company," Oliver said softly. "And hot chocolate." Sophie sat beside me, her 13-year-old hand slipping into mine. "Grandma? Was Grandpa a good man?" I thought about the question, really thought about it. Not the easy answer, but the true one. "He was a man who made mistakes," I said finally. "He lied to protect himself at first, then to protect me. But he spent 40 years trying to make things right. He wasn't perfect, Sophie. He was just human, and he loved us more than anything." "That's what matters," Sophie said with the certainty only children possess. We sat together in the winter sun, drinking hot chocolate at Raymond's grave, and I felt something settle in my chest. Not closure, I wasn't sure I'd ever have that, but acceptance, understanding. Raymond Lockwood had been James Whitmore III. My husband had been a fugitive. Our marriage had been built on a foundation of lies. But the love? That had been real. Every morning he'd made me coffee. Every evening we'd sat on the porch watching fireflies. Every harvest we'd worked side by side. Every laugh, every argument, every quiet moment. Those had been true. You can't fake 40 years of devotion. You can't pretend your way through a lifetime of small kindnesses. Whatever name he'd used, whatever past he'd hidden, the man I'd loved had been genuine. "Thank you," I whispered to the headstone, "for loving me, for trusting me to finish this, and for teaching me that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply choose to live authentically, whatever the cost." Oliver's arm came around my shoulders. Sophie leaned against my other side. 3 generations, bound together by a man who'd believed family was worth any sacrifice. As we walked back to the car, Sophie asked, "What happens now, Grandma?" I looked back at the cemetery one last time, then at the road ahead, the road leading home to the farm where Raymond and I had built our life. "Now?" I smiled. "Now we live. We work the land. We help people through the foundation. We remember the past but don't let it define us." I squeezed her hand. "We choose truth over secrets, love over fear, and we make sure that what Raymond started, what he died protecting, actually changes things." "Sounds like a plan," Oliver said quietly. We drove home together, to the farmhouse where Raymond Lockwood had found peace, where Beatrice Lockwood had found strength, and where a family would continue to grow, rooted in truth, watered by forgiveness, and reaching always toward the light.